Superman is one of the most anticipated comic book movies in several years, not because everyone's necessarily excited for this movie, but because of the expectation that comes with portraying such an iconic character. Superman was first introduced to the world all the way back in the year of 1938 and has had decades of interpretations, from campy and weird to dark and edgy. With a cape, no cape, black suit, red suit, no matter the depiction, he still retained his iconic silhouette. However, Superman isn't the easiest character to write for in modern day, as the modern day audience has become far more cynical of kindness with time. One of the character's main attributes that keeps him pure and that inspires hope to not just characters in the comics, but also us as the reader. Going into this film, not only are expectations high, as James Gunn is not only writing and directing for an iconic character, but he must convince the audience to get on board with a new vision for DC. Also, the recently ripped bandage of replacing Henry Cavill as Superman. So the question is, did he deliver a true to form Superman movie? The answer is yes. Not only did he give one of my favorite Superman movies, but he also made a pure comic book film. The greatest comic book film. That's far from perfect. Why is it so compelling? I grew up not being a big Superman fan and always gravitated towards other characters like Batman, Spider-Man, the Hulk, and the X-Men. For some reason, I never connected with the character until I saw Man of Steel. That film piqued my interest in the character, and at the time I adored that movie. I started exploring other Superman media, then came to the realization that Henry Cavill's portrayal after Man of Steel wasn't accurate to the character at all. Snyder definitely seemed more interested in the imagery of the character than the actual character himself. My favorite interpretation of the character was always the animated series. And this film captures the magic of that series and the Silver Age of Superman comics very well. From the opening scene of the movie, I could tell that James Gunn really understands and welcomes the comic books. This film feels like a living comic book on screen, and it arguably is a living cartoon. It doesn't give another Superman origin story, and it throws you right into the action, into this world of established characters. That may not work for audiences who prefer to have a more grounded approach to superheroes, and I can see the film being divisive. This film is clearly unforgiving to people who aren't knowledgeable of the character, and it's a bold move. I thoroughly enjoyed that as someone who is familiar with the source material. David Corenswet as our new Man of Steel, Superman. David Corenswet is a fantastic Superman. He is a very different version of the character from other on-screen portrayals, but feels the most relatable he's ever been, in my opinion. It feels like the film emphasizes the man in Superman. The beauty of the character is that he's an alien raised on Earth. He may have godlike abilities, but he's absolutely one of us. He does the right thing no matter what and values life over anything. I also love how throughout the film we can see him inspire others around him, from civilians to the Justice Gang, or even characters like Metamorpho. His purity and heroism is what invokes hope, and he's the Superman that we need now more than ever. With a world so filled with cynicism and pain, it's refreshing to see a portrayal that has an answer to what's wrong with the world. I love his performance as Clark Kent as well. I was surprised to not see his alter ego as much throughout the film, but what we did get was brilliant, and it was almost like watching an entirely different character. The supporting characters of Superman. There are a lot of supporting characters in this movie, and for many people this might be a negative, especially since the film's runtime won't be able to give everyone an equal level of development. However, this film is in fact titled Superman, and the characters all play an integral role to his development and the momentum in his story. James Gunn has made many superhero movies with a lot of characters, and usually he utilizes all of them well within the story. This film's no different. The Daily Planet crew have a fun subplot in exposing Lex Luthor and his antics. The crew fits well into this established world and all ooze with personality throughout. My personal favorite being Jimmy Olsen, because his subplot is absolutely hilarious and does lead into a conclusion towards the end of the film. The Justice Gang create an established world of heroes and have the feeling of a Justice League Unlimited cartoon. I also love the dynamics of the team, and the performances are great. Nathan Fillion is great and hilarious as Guy Gardner, and yes, they do acknowledge how terrible his haircut is. Mr. Terrific is the standout of the team, and he just brings such phenomenal moments throughout. Lois Lane is great in this film, and Rachel Brosnahan has an excellent performance throughout this entire movie. She feels like she was pulled straight out of the animated series and had great chemistry with Corrin Sweat throughout the film. Not only being a fully developed character, we understand her better than other versions of the character, and she seems to genuinely like Superman than other portrayals that have an infatuation with him. It's a phenomenal portrayal, and I can't wait to see more of her in the future of the DCU. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor is phenomenal.
Where's the dog?
I have no clue what you're talking about. I don't know what dog you're talking about. Ugly dog in a cape.
What did you say?
Nicholas Hoult was a fantastic Lex Luthor. He has many elements that make him great. He feels like an amalgamation of many different versions over the years, from the 60s to the 90s to the early 2000s to modern day. Everything about him is just pure hate and jealousy, perfectly in line with the character, and I like how the film wasn't afraid to make him an unsympathetic character. He wants to ruin Superman's reputation and gain more power than he already has. He's completely an irredeemable evil, and that's great. There was a scene involving him in a game of Russian roulette between someone who was nice to Superman just to get information out of him that stuck with me, and it showed just how purely twisted and evil this Lex Luthor is, and how the film was not afraid to go to dark places, especially with this villain. It's rare that we see villains who are just evil nowadays, and it feels refreshing in a weird way. Great villain, and I'm glad they didn't kill him, as he'll further develop in the DCU. Krypto. Krypto is a dog, and he behaves like a dog, or any dog would, or should I say a hyperactive dog. He's not a great boy, but he is a standout in the film. Yeah, he's cute and funny. Mostly cute. The action. A common complaint is that Superman feels majorly underpowered and that he gets beat up throughout the entire film. First of all, he deals with villains way stronger than the other heroes deal with in this movie. Secondly, I do think that this is a good thing. It makes his victory feel far more grand at the end, rather than the formulaic Superman's able to just push through everything, but then by the final act he is injured by kryptonite. It gives struggles towards the character, and it makes his victories towards the end feel far more grand. Plus, it feels like the animated series brought to live action, and that depiction struggled all the time. As a matter of fact, that version of the character was always knocked unconscious by other villains. Bottom line, I liked it, and it makes him feel more relatable with the fact that he has opposition, he has struggles. The choreography throughout the entire sequences of him fighting feel entirely in line with the character. They use creative usage of his powers. I also love how he goes around trying to save as many people as possible while fighting these larger than life villains. The standout action sequence for me personally was, well, two of them. Mr. Terrific and his T-Spears protecting Lois Lane and trying to break into prison to break Superman out, And the second sequence that I thought was absolutely phenomenal was Superman versus Ultraman and the Engineer. It was brutal, it was heavy, and had a lot of impact to it, and a lot of creative usage of the character's abilities. I love a lot about this movie, and there are a lot of things that I can keep gassing up throughout this entire video essay. But there are also some major flaws that are holding it back from being the best DC movie or potentially amongst the top 10. Here are my negatives with the film. With as many characters as there are throughout the film, there's too many subplots, and they can oftentimes take away from moments that some of the main characters could receive more development in the story. And also can be very frantic to the point where you can kind of lose track of what's going on. I didn't lose track in this movie that often, much like I did in the second act. The second act is my biggest complaint of the film. It felt very disconjointed. I didn't like the little pocket dimension antics that happened with Superman, and there were some tech monkeys in there, and just overall Rainbow Rivers. It was just maybe a little bit too much thrown in here, and it was almost like they threw a bag of Skittles on the screen. You couldn't really tell what was happening in those moments. And while the humor in this film is solid enough, there's a lot of unnecessary humor that can also take away from some tense or emotional beats throughout the entire movie. Perfect example being Superman's talk with Lois Lane, as there's an interdimensional being outside the window that the Justice Gang are fighting. You're trying to pay attention to the scene, but it's played up more for laughs with that being on the outside of the window. Highly unnecessary. Also, the death of one of Superman's friends, I guess, or the person that was nice to him in the film, was very heavy, but then it cuts to some fun antics immediately after, which degraded the moment a lot. And with as much as I praise this film for leading with the comic books and just going for it, it can be a little bit too comic booky for some audiences, and I know the second act definitely felt that way for me and almost lost me in that moment, despite the rest of the film being very enjoyable. Also, the ending I was not a huge fan of either. I do feel like they kind of wrapped everything up in a nice tight bow very quickly, and they also didn't allow a lot of moments to breathe very well. I love the speech that Superman gives to Luthor, but then I don't like how immediately afterwards they interject Krypto beating up Luthor, which was just more unnecessary humor. And I do feel like some subplots just never felt like they were truly addressed or properly resolved in the film. In conclusion, I can say that Superman 2025 is far from the perfect movie. However, the positives in the movie are really positive. And there's something that I felt leaving this theater that I haven't felt with a DC movie in a long time, and that's joy. I haven't left out of a comic book movie in a long time leaving out very happy. This film is a very good, feel-good film, and it's probably the film that we need the most from superhero movies nowadays, considering the fact that there's so much darkness in this world. And having a beacon of hope like this hopeful Superman is just what we need at just the right time. Zack Snyder's interpretation of the character Man of Steel I'll always enjoy, but also at the same time, looking back at that film, I can see how it wasn't necessarily the character of Superman. This film is Superman through and through, and also establishes a solid setup towards the DCU at the same time, and gives me an interpretation of the character that I have probably related to the most out of all the versions.